Hi, my name is Vince, and welcome to Strategic Reserves. Today, we're talking about... Wait, that's the most blue-clad wretched shit I've ever seen! You. We're talking about Angron. Run. Alright, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we're talking about Angron, the demon Primarch of Khorne, the absolute angriest boy in the whole 40k universe. Well, what are we talking about specifically? Pretty simple. Number one, we're going to talk about how to actually use Angron. And what I mean by that is exactly how is best to deliver him to your enemy. Number two, we're talking about pros and cons of adding him to your list. And number three, finally, we're going to talk about some enemies you may want to reconsider when it comes time to do some charges with Angron. Now, with this, with this information, I do not claim to be a know-it-all. I don't know everything. I have played a lot of Warhammer. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I've played a lot of Warhammer. And so I have some knowledge, and I thought I'd share it with you here, but it also gives the opportunity for you to share knowledge with me. So please like the video, but subscribe, and most importantly, please leave comments down below. We're trying to create a community where people can go and help get their mind going to create lists. If you're somebody who's playing World Eaters players a lot, or you are a World Eaters player, or you think you might be playing some World Eaters players for an upcoming tournament, it's a great video, great information you're not going to want to miss. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So, how do we use it? Well, it's really easy. There's two legitimate ways to use Angron. Number one, you walk across the board and you go slap somebody in the face. Harder than, if you're Khorne slapping Scarbrand. But there's also the deep strike ability, and that is pretty strong. And I know a lot of people have questions about when's it good to deep strike, when's it not good to deep strike. I'm not going to answer that question here. What I am going to do is give you some info, so when you're playing your games and it comes time for you to make that decision on what you should do, maybe you can make it with a little bit better info in your pocket. So, what are we talking about specifically? Well, I think the most important thing you need to know is when you are playing World Eaters, turn one, under the assumption you have a backfield objective holder that has an icon of Khorne, which I'm going to assume they do. Otherwise, look at your list. But it's either Berserkers or Jackals, and they're on your backfield objective, giving you that one free reroll, and that's going to be crucial to our math for this. But what we're talking about is turn one, you will have a 68% chance of getting advance and charge and plus 2-inch movement. That's pretty good. That's only if you have that reroll. The reroll is really important, but that gets you up to 68% with that single reroll. I think it's extremely important. If you don't play World Eaters, if you've never played World Eaters, this may sound kind of strange, but if you're a World Eaters player, you know that advance and charge turn one is like critical to our game. Can you win without it? Definitely. Does it help? Of course. So just know that, Matt, 68%, that's the odds of you actually getting what you want turn one. Now, why that's important is because the second way to actually bring Angron into combat is deep strike, as we talked about. Well, deep striking is typically very unreliable. You got a 9-inch charge, and that's usually really hard to do. The benefit here, though, is with Angron, he has his Wrathful Presence ability, so you're going to be able to add +1 to that charge. Coming out from deep strike, you're going to have an 8-inch charge. That is huge. Not to mention, you should be saving that reroll for Angron's charge. Angron's a very expensive model, 415 points. If he does not charge and stands out in the open, you will feel like a big, foolish potato, staring at it as it gets gunned down in the middle of nowhere, and it does nothing for you, and that will be miserable. So, deep strike. What are the odds on a deep strike? Well, with that +1 inch to charge, and keeping that reroll in your pocket, just in case you need it, you're at a 66% chance of making an 8-inch charge on turn 2 with Angron with that reroll. That's huge. That's only a 2% difference from giving your whole army advance and charge and the +2-inch movement, which is obviously better. So, in my opinion, you start him on the battlefield. If you're not starting him on the battlefield, you need to have a good reason why. Now, what is the reason? This is how I'll explain it. I was kind of talking to a friend about World Eaters a couple of months ago, and then literally 2 days ago, I ran into him, and he was playing World Eaters, and he had Angron, and he had him in deep strike. Not arguing, because I'm advocating for that here. But what he did that I didn't agree with is when I asked him, "Oh, that's interesting. Why'd you put him in deep strike?" He was like, "Oh, well, he's got the guns and stuff, and I'm not, I can't, yeah, I can't." Okay, whatever. I personally feel like if you're going to tell me, and I'm talking to you, you know who you are. If you're going to tell me that you don't know why you put Angron in deep strike, I would assume you've maybe made a mistake. Now, if you're like, oh, well, that's because Tal railguns, and you 1, 2, 3, or Magna rails 1, 2, 3, or all kinds of things, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. But more specifically, if they have one of those things where you just know it's just Angron ain't surviving against this, I don't have it. That's a lot of anti-tank shooting. Don't force it. I really think that's a mistake that we typically make, is when you force that on the board. When you force Angron to walk across the board when he absolutely should have the ability, and does have the ability to deep strike, but you're afraid you're not going to get your value, or you're not going to charge. As long as you get that +1 to charge, you keep the reroll in your pocket, you have a 2 out of 3 chance essentially of making that charge, and that is pretty good. So I think that you should consider deep striking Angron a very viable method, only if all else fails as far as getting on the battlefield, or your opponent just deploys all the way against the backfield with a great shooting army. Don't force it. Put him in deep strike, come out, and just wreak havoc into his lines while the rest of your stuff is advancing and charging across the battlefield. Unless there's a big, beautiful ruin for him to stand behind, then I would advocate almost certainly for a big, beautiful ruin. But don't sleep on deep strike. That's the end of it. Let's move on. Okay, pros and cons. So, what are the pros and cons to bringing Angron? We're going to start with the cons, specifically because the list is a lot shorter in my opinion. So, the cons are, he is not as tough as you want him to be, and he's probably not going to be around as long as you want him to be. It's just the sad nature of him. He has toughness 11. He's not toughness 12 or better, which means a lot of things are going to wound him on 3s. There's a lot of strength 12 weapons. He is going to die if he's out of cover, if he is in the open. He does not have the toughness to stand against most of the shooting that exists in this edition. That being said, the terrain in this edition is very, very favorable to him. There's a lot of terrain to hide behind, but that's certainly a huge con as far as I'm concerned. The other cons are his melee profile is really, really great, but it's terrible against a really specific profile, and that is Terminators. If you have large Terminator-like bodies, like a 10-man unit of Terminators, God forbid they're Hearthguard. I mean, if you have anything that's the larger 4-up invuln, toughness 5 or better bodies, you are chewing through them with Angron. And that actually is something that I would steer away from. There's so much going on with Angron, and so much he's able to do, but there are a couple things he is not able to do. And that is really important to know, and that's what we're going to get to in the last section. But first, we're going to cover the pros. Now, Angron has too many pros. He is absolutely a pro at killing. He's a pro at buffing his army. The man's a pro. But it's just, do those outweigh his cons? Yeah, they outweigh his cons. Move on to the next part of the video. Just play the model. And if you don't like him, he doesn't work well for you, all I'm going to add to that is he may not work with your playstyle. Everyone plays this game differently. We all utilize our units in our own unique ways. Maybe he doesn't work with you. Try without him. But if it's me, he's in my list. All right, it is time for the main event. So what we're going to talk about is 5 units that you might want to think twice about before charging with Angron. Okay, starting with our one honorable mention, the Great Unclean One. The Great Unclean One, rocking the Endless Gift, is a tough nut to crack. I'm not going to go into great detail about all the different stats on him, but if you're playing an opponent with Chaos Demons and they have a Great Unclean One and it has the Endless Gift, yeah, it's a slog. You're going to have to get through it. Almost certainly want to put 8-bound near it. That's all I'm going to give to you with that. Moving on. Number 5 on my list, the Lion. The Lion is a beast. Love the Lion. Has fight first. We don't like that. Has a 3-up invuln. We don't like that. On average, you're going to do 8 wounds to the Lion with Angron. He has 10 wounds to work with. So he's not only going to punch you, He's then going to survive your punch, and depending on the situation, if you charged him or not, he might be able to fall back with his detachment and shoot and charge. Be aware of what he can do. He is a myriad of options, and all of them have importance to the way that you should be playing your game. Number 4, the Knight Lancer. The Knight Lancer has a lot to hate. It has a good toughness, a great invuln. It's got the 4-up invuln. It has 25 wounds in its wound pool, which for us, we're on average doing 13. You're not chewing through it. There's a 9% chance in change, almost, I think it's like just shy of a 10% chance that you could kill the Lancer in one activation, whereas he has like a 40-something% chance of clapping back and killing you without any modifications of any kind. So be aware of that. Not to mention the Knight Lancer is a huge threat to us because he has the free tank shock and he has Lance if he actually charges you. So, yeah, he certainly could become a huge problem. Be aware of it. Be alert. Make choices appropriately. That's my number 4. Number 3 on this list is a call or a champion with Hearthguard. They are 2 wound models, but their combination of -1 to wound, 4-up invuln means that on average with Angron, you're killing like 4 models. And that means that you're going to take 2 or 3 activations before you're even into the character, which means he is doing 2 or 3 activations to you, not to mention the rest of the unit. You're not surviving that. And if you do, when you get on the other side, I'm not even going to entertain that. You won't survive that. Just, you won't. And if you do, you've spent 3 turns doing it. And for your model to just sit there for 3 turns, there's a whole mess of problems there. I would advise against it. There's better units to kill Hearthguard. There's just a myriad of them. Angron ain't it. Simple. Moving on to number 2. Number 2 on this list is none other than the filthy, filthy Catan. The Catan have everything we could not want to see on an enemy, they have. They are toughness 11, which isn't really a huge problem, but they have a 4-up invuln, which is a problem. They have a 5-up feel no pain, which is a problem. And the biggest problem of all, half damage. Half damage for Angron means Angron be a sad boy. I would highly recommend you never charge a Catan, especially like a Nightbringer, because he's going to be doing mortal wounds then at the end of the charge phase or the end of the fight phase, and the clapback will almost certainly claim your life. I just don't think it is the best choice of a unit to charge. If you have to do it, I understand, but you may want to try to look for other options before you run that in there. So, lastly on the list, number 1, we made it. We're here. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but number 1 is garbage. Garbage, garbage. It is something I see. It is something I've done. We've all done it. Running Angron into garbage is usually a mistake. Now, if you can use it to leapfrog because you have consolidation moves from unit to unit to unit, then you could potentially sell me on the idea that, okay, I charged these, but there was a reason. If you're charging a 65-point scout unit, or something along those lines, you probably are giving your opponent value. It's that plain and simple. There's other things in your army. Angron is for killing the biggest, toughest, meanest brutes on the other team, especially if they got like 2-up save vehicles without invulns. Those are just tasty. But things like garbage, like screener units and stuff like that, they're just not what you want to be charging. And you really should be thinking twice about before using your charges to get into those kinds of things. And it's that simple. We're done. That's it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support, the likes, subscribe, please comment. If you have any questions, if you want me to answer anything in future videos, please drop a comment below and I'd be happy to do so. I absolutely wish you all the best on the tabletop and in life, and I will see you next time.